the kinds of things a woman should consider by the nature of her being female when she's trying to decide to be part of a research study?
Well, obviously there are many, many questions here, and we've got NIH meetings, Office of Research on Women's Health, had a whole set of meetings devoted to pregnant women in clinical trials. We don't want to be too paternalistic, and we don't want to say, no pregnant woman in clinical trial. One of the reasons being that sometimes pregnant women need to take some of these drugs for life-saving purposes, and if we have no data at all on how it might impact them, this is a problem. Now, obviously, if you have a wanted child and you're carrying a fetus and there's a potential for teratogenic effect, you have to be really careful. But there are examples of situations where, the data, say animal data, are not strong and it's a theoretical risk, and there could be a really compelling benefit for such a woman to be in a clinical trial. We just have to be a little bit more flexible, careful but flexible. And I think there are many women who would want to be enrolled in a clinical trial that might, in fact, involve taking a drug, for example. So we're looking at that in a more nuanced way. But the problem we have right now is that we are bathed in toxics. We've got xenoestrogens in the, water we drink, in the food we eat sometimes. We've got all kinds of exposures to toxics and things that lock into estrogen receptor cells that are so potent in terms of confounding variables that I think it's very difficult to do some of the research we'd like to do. That you just can't think of, say, a hormone that's exogenously administered as being the only influence on that woman's life. She's got all these other estrogenic-like compounds that are having an impact on her life, maybe her fetus, maybe her children, household compounds, the cleaning products, all kinds of things that we use, personal care products that touch the skin, touch our hair. Many of these have very questionable components. So it's very difficult to do research in such a way that eliminates all the confounding variables out there. And I think it's a real challenge to get at the answer of some of the questions we have now. But we should keep paying attention to the fact that when women get pregnant, to the extent it's possible, it would be nice to minimize assaults on the fetus to the extent we can. And we do know some of these. I remember the what was it that we used for skin? Accutane. We didn't have strong enough warnings, and we had some awful outcomes when pregnant women took Accutane. This was even worse than the earlier crisis we had with
Thalidomide.
That's it. See, this is my brain doing. We know thalidomide did damage, and we know that we wanted to avoid using thalidomide during pregnancy. With Accutane, we actually had a far greater risk, something like 30 to 35% increased risk of serious birth defects and really bad outcomes from using Accutane during particularly the early stages of pregnancy. We weren't doing a good job of making sure that young women who might get pregnant or who did get pregnant were not taking Accutane. So there are examples like that where we've got good data and we really should go, the full 9 yards and make sure that we're avoiding exposure because we got the good data there. And there are times when we don't do as good a job when we've got the evidence and we need to protect the public better. And so we need to put more energy when we've got the data. Something like Accutane is a good example. I also think that we've got certainly a lot to learn about many of the practices in the ART field, assisted reproductive technology, particularly the suppression of ovarian function coupled with hyperstimulation of the ovaries. A lot we have yet to learn there for subsequent problems that may or may not be occurring. One thing I will tell you, this is one of the reasons why we support the Infertility Family Research Registry, want more longitudinal research here, is that anecdotally we're hearing from many women now in their 30s who did 2, 3, sometimes 4 times multiple egg extraction techniques when they were younger in graduate school, and now find themselves infertile, going back to fertility centers who are telling them, yes, we're seeing more of you now, those of you who gave eggs before, needing our services, and we are here to help you. Well, that's good they're here to help them, but we need to know more about, well, is this a cohort of young women, they're healthy when they started out, who are damaging their future reproductive capacity because they're doing maybe several times of egg extraction in a row, maybe doing it once. I mean, we just don't know enough, and we need to track their health better.
Other than ART issues, what other serious challenges do you think affect women in the future with regards to research?
Well, I think that we are looking more carefully at the long-term use of psychotropic drugs. We know now that some women who are severely depressed postpartum are a big threat to their newborns because they cannot cope. They cannot take care of the baby. And we do know that some of those women need lots of attention and care. Sometimes it's human support. Sometimes it might be a psychotropic drug. It might be some sort of antidepressant. We need to continue tracking the health of offspring as well as the ability of these women to function well. I think we need more research on the whole phenomenon of tapering off, because many people do want to taper off from a variety of drugs that may be helping them, because we're beginning to learn that long-term use of some of these drugs can harm them in other ways in terms of their long-term health. So that's one thing. And we see use of diet drugs, long-term use of diet drugs wreaking havoc on some women's health and well-being. We need some good studies there. We've pulled some drugs off the market when we saw them doing severe damage to women's hearts. Some of that we're not going to know till post-marketing surveillance, but to the extent we can do better in longitudinal research early on, that would be great. I think one of the problems is that we sometimes see ourselves using drugs and hormones when we're not conferring maximum benefit and maybe actually introducing significant harm. One important area where we need better research, but we already have some pretty darn good research, has to do with hormone use around the perimenopause. And the Women's Health Initiative findings are really still quite solid. There's been an attempt to discredit them and an attempt to sort of roll us backwards and to resell estrogens and hormones in ways that are not very productive. We need to be really much more nuanced and careful in how we look at the data and how we do studies going forward. The Women's Health Initiative is still a very good set of studies, and we have learned a lot from them that still stand in good stead for those of us here. There are also things we're learning about bioidentical hormones. We have an FDA-approved product that helps women who are using progesterone, a progesterone-only approach to dealing with really severe hot flashes when they're in a category of women who may want to avoid estrogen use for some reason or another. We are trying to teach the public to steer clear of the term ERT. The federal government already does that at the NIH website. We call it hormone therapy, not HRT, hormone replacement therapy, because that idea that you must replace hormones is an outdated one. Sometimes we need hormones, and we need them to be used judiciously for sometimes short periods of time. They really help enormously. But we don't want to foster this idea that we get to a certain point in our lives and we absolutely have to replace those hormones. And there are some challenges out there. There's a film not very well done called Hot Flash Havoc that many researchers have really not been happy with, because it misrepresents the Women's Health Initiative, and it doesn't present a balanced view the way many researchers would like. And so we've got to sometimes offset some of these more popularized appeals that don't take the best of research and present it to women, but give a really pat, misleading, sometimes cutified answer to questions women have.